Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Woven Daily. We're going through Acts as our Woven Daily, and we're in Acts chapter 7. So on Saturday, Joe went through the first few bits of Acts 7 down to verse 7, and today I've just been given one verse. One verse, you say? I mean, how can we just have one verse when we're going through Acts? But it's an interesting verse, right in the very heart of Stephen's speech. So let me read it to you. Acts 7 verse 8 says this: "Then he gave Abraham the covenant of circumcision, and Abraham became the father of Isaac and circumcised him 8 days after his birth. Later Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob became the father of the 12 patriarchs." Now, this is a fascinating speech which Stephen makes. It's his last words, really. Can you imagine? What would you say if you were about to be stoned? People were coming after you. What would be your last words? Well, these were the ones that Stephen chose. He actually chose words to reach out to the people that were actively trying to stone him, to see if they might be saved, to see if he could persuade them that actually Jesus was the Messiah. They were last words of love. And so he delves back into the history that they all shared. Abraham has given the covenant of circumcision, he says. This is a key moment in the people of God where they receive the covenant of circumcision. Now, if you look into the book of Genesis and find the story of Abraham and the gift of the covenant which God makes with them. Covenant, by the way, is just where two people are joined together as one. Two people or two parties are joined together as one. And so we see our modern example is marriage, where two are joined together as one. They make a covenant with one another. And so here God is making covenant with Abraham and his descendants. That's why it constantly references in the New Testament that we are adopted in to be Abraham's descendants. It's because of this covenant. Now, the making of the covenant is a slightly weird situation. First, you get this moment where Abraham cuts all these animals in half and lays them out in a sort of corridor of blood. And he obviously walks through it as he creates this. And then he falls asleep, and this smoking firepot comes to symbolize God's presence. And God's presence passes between the two people. And we find that is a key moment of the covenant being made. It may just seem incredibly weird to us. Why on earth would God make covenant in that way? Well, it was an ancient ritual of the time where two tribes would join together as one to be one tribe. And they would do that symbol, the same thing. They'd cut animals in half and walk between the corridor of blood, crossing one side to the other. It was a symbol. The reason they used the animals in the corridor of blood was so that if they broke the covenant, the idea was that they should become like the animals that they had walked between, where they had made the promises to one another. They should die if they weren't faithful to the covenant. But as we know, Abraham himself, Isaac, and all the descendants to come weren't consistently faithful to the covenant. Even though God was faithful to them, they were not faithful to God. There was a problem. And so that covenant needed to be finished, to be completed, to be fulfilled, which is what happens as Jesus dies upon the cross for you and for me. That covenant was fulfilled. But not only was it fulfilled, a new covenant was cut in his blood, a new corridor of blood made for you and for me to be able to walk into through the blood of the cross, into covenant relationship with God where we are joined together. That's the invitation of relationship from God which is made to you, where we're in his history of the covenant. And it speaks in that passage, Stephen mentions the covenant of circumcision. Circumcision was the sign of the completeness of that covenant that was given to those people. The new sign given to us of the completeness of the covenant relationship we have with God is baptism. I have to say, I'm sure pleased it's baptism rather than circumcision for us. But that is what God gives us. And so as we go down into the water and come back out from the water, and we breathe new life, the new life of the relationship with God, which God gives us, drawing us into union with him, his presence and his power. And so in this crucial moment, in Stephen's speech, as he's explaining what happens in Jesus, he mentions the covenant of Abraham, that we can be sure that a new covenant is made for us. Did you know the word New Testament just means new covenant? It's all about the new covenant that God makes with us in order to usher us into his presence today. And so however hard this day is for you, maybe you've woken up this morning just feeling low, lonely. Maybe you're not well. Maybe there's people that you're really fretting about or worrying about. Maybe you're not sure what's going to happen with your work. There are loads of things that are on our minds, but there is one thing that we can be sure of. Through the death and resurrection of Jesus, a new covenant has been made. He draws us into relationship with him. We can never fail because of the cross of Jesus always takes away our failure. You are drawn into closeness of covenant relationship with God. He loves you. He is with you. He will not leave you and he will not let you down this day and forevermore. Amen. I believe that's something that is to be celebrated today and lived into. Have a fabulous day. God bless.